Hello, everyone, and welcome to my very first episode of Zero Fucks Left, the podcast where we stop pretending, start telling the truth, and have the conversations people are usually too uncomfortable to touch. My name is Jorge Xolalpa. I'm a filmmaker, author, public speaker, and activist, and the host of Zero Fucks Left, who early last year decided to have zero fucks left for anything or anyone. I create work that amplifies underrepresented voices, digs into emotional truths, and pushes the boundaries of storytelling. And now I'm bringing that same energy to the podcast. This space is for real stories, real emotions, and real talk about the systems that shape us, the moments that change us, and the situations that force us to evolve into who we are today. It's completely unfiltered, so stay tuned and watch. This isn't about being polished. This is about being honest, and today's conversation is exactly about that. Today's guest is a writer, filmmaker, and activist, and the author of The Cost of Being Undocumented, a powerful and deeply personal book that explores what she calls the inhumane math of living in the United States without legal status. Through her own life, from fleeing violence to navigating school, healthcare, work, and identity in a country that depends on undocumented labor while denying undocumented people the basic dignity to live. She puts a human face on policies that are too often reduced to politics and headlines. Her work focuses on to confront not just the legal systems, but the emotional, financial, and psychological costs of being treated as disposable in a place you call home. Please help me welcome my dear friend and talented author, Alix Dick.
Yay!
How are you doing today? How are you doing today? Yes. ¿Cómo estás? How are you doing today? Tell me everything.
I'm doing so great today, which is like rare for the last few months of my life. But I'm so excited to be here with you, with a best-selling author. Excuse me.
Thank you. But it's not about me today. It's about you. I want people to get to know you. I'm excited to have you. And, to be completely transparent, as I want this podcast to be, late 2 years ago, late 2024, I started venturing into podcasting. We shot some episodes. It didn't work out. And I'm back today. I'm officially back. I'm hoping this works out because I've been wanting to do a podcast. And I thought, what best way to have my podcast kickoff opening than with one of my best friends who I've known for the last, I think I'm going to say almost 11, 12 years now. Yeah. And we're each other hype man, hype woman. And we're in each other's corners and we're always watching each other's work and championing each other. So I thought with everything that's happening today, you know what, Alix, I'm going to dive right into it because I want to know what, I want to hear from you and I want our listeners to hear from you. And I want to start with a question that, as unfiltered as they can get. What was happening in your life when you realized that your story couldn't stay private anymore?
Yeah. So for many years, as you know, but people might not know this about me, I'm also a filmmaker and not only a writer and an author. And for a very long time, I was trying to adapt my life in a TV series because I thought that was the best way where I could be creative and I could actually bring this message to people, which, funny enough, when I started having these thoughts, I was not even undocumented, which is like the crazy part. And during that process, I became undocumented. And I was an advocate for undocumented people without realizing that at some point in my life, I was going to become them. And I think my life is a testimony that sometimes we become what we don't understand and how we have to always have compassion because you never know when tragic is going to hit your life. So for a very long time, I was trying to pitch in the idea to do a TV series with my life. And for many years, I almost had great deals, but nothing ever happened. And during that time, I met Professor Antero, who was the one who invited me to start doing social research and working with him. And thanks to him, a lot of doors opened for me to be able to do what I'm doing now. So there was an option to there were a few options to keep trying to get the TV series and to get the money to produce it and do everything else, or to do it the other route, which is a book. And thankfully, that was the doors that were open for me. And if I'm honest with you, I still think my book shouldn't exist. The fact that I have to write a book to try to convince people that we are human and that our stories are more complex than the media says, and that the understanding that people have about our lives is just mind-blowing to me that this book even has to exist. But I'm very grateful that I was able to to get everything I needed in order for this book to be out in the world. But it's not easy work. I wish this was not my life. I wish this book didn't have to exist for anybody to read. But it's very urgent, and the fact that the troops were sent to LA the same week that the book came out says a lot. And even in the events, I have a lot of stories of what was happening in order for the book events to happen, which has been incredibly challenging to do events in a time like this.
Yeah. No, 100%. And, I think part of why I wanted to launch this podcast is because a lot of my guests, starting with you, we all have something in common. And the week that you released your book, that's the week that I decided that I was going to move forward in self-publishing my book. Even though I had several offers, I made the decision that I was going to do that on my own because, the race started in June, and it was around the time when I was doing property management, and, these kidnappers, I'm going to call them what they are, came into my building and took several families. And that same night, I ended up writing an additional chapter about the experience of being at the epicenter of these raids. So I completely understand where you're coming from, having released the book and having it be a moment of celebration. How I feel in a way it became also tainted by what was happening, which leads me to my following question. While reading the book, you use the phrase "the inhumane math of being undocumented." Break that down for us. What's being calculated and who's doing the math? And I mean that metaphorically, of course, because I speak about it. It's like sometimes I'm like the math ain't mathing, right? Because they say one thing about people, but then they end up doing something else, and we see it as what's happening today in Minnesota. But staying in our experience as undocumented folks, where does that phrase come from, and how do you calculate that our life matters or not to this nation?
Yeah. So I think to start with, thank you so much for bringing that up, because I feel like everybody has an opinion and the media has an opinion of social economics, and we're talking always about money. And I think that's one of the main issues that I had when I decided to actually write a book as this book, because I feel like people do not read enough and do not see data enough in science. And this is the reason why I thought it was convenient for me to not only collaborate with Professor Antero, who is very well known and has great connections with people who are the leaders in research in this country, who I might not be an expert, but these people are. This is what they dedicate their life to see the numbers and to see, is it actually bad for the economy to have this type of people here? Is it real that our taxes are like being damaged because these people exist? And that is true. And I'm sure that people who are listening to this are aware, because I want to believe that the people who support us are aware that undocumented people pay over $100 billion in tax dollars. And that's just like one of the math that we have to do in order for them to understand, are we actually taking from you guys, or are we adding value not only in cultural and in other areas, but we're also adding value in money? Because in fact, we don't, and you and I can have this conversation openly, we don't receive anything back from the taxes that we pay. We don't have a 401k, we don't have healthcare, and all of those lies that have been happening. I'm like, I had conversations with people who used to be my friends in the past, who would tell me, yeah, but you're, as an undocumented person, you're able to buy a house, you're able to rent a place without showing anything on your name, you're able to have healthcare for free. And those questions and things that people came to me to tell me, I always tell them, to start with, even if you want to apply for healthcare, you have to prove that you pay taxes.
100%.
So, if you want to rent a place, you have to show that you pay taxes. Yeah. And all the years that I've been here in the United States, I came with a visa, and unfortunately that visa expired while I was here. And this is why I told you, it was very unexpected for me to become what I am now, because even though that I was trying to pursue a law degree and I was very involved in this movement long before I became undocumented, and I had the compassion and the empathy to undocumented people, to DACA recipients, I never knew in my head that that could happen to me because I didn't quite understand the system. I understand the humanity in the process. I just didn't understand the system the way that I understand it now. And another way that we talk about math, to do the math about undocumented people, is like we can talk about money all we want, right? But at the end of the day, there are so many things that we don't take account on, which is like the mental health, how our health goes to downhill because we're overworked, we're overstressed, and we're not able to get the help that we need when we need it. So can we talk about that emotional math that nobody seems to understand, right? And I think the book was, my biggest desire is for people to understand that the information that they have, it's not even accurate.
It's not. And I think that, you do such a great way of explaining these statistics and this research in your book, but we're literally entering a time where you could be standing in front of a blue car and someone could say it's red and they won't believe it's blue, even if it's blue, right? Because people have become so entitled to their opinions that they've forgotten that facts are the way to live by, right? And which leads me to the next question. But before I ask you the next question, I kind of want to reiterate that a lot of the violence that happens outside of the United States has been infused by the United States, which has in part pushed people to migrate to this country because we come out of options, right? We run out of options. Mm-hmm. I came here with a visa as well, and I never understood why my mom has such a powerful love and respect and honor for this document that it took for me to be an adult to understand why. For her, it was her ticket out of an abusive relationship. It was a ticket out of poverty. Despite us being not living under poor standards, but in Mexico around that time, for her it was like, I can build a better life in America for my children and myself. So I know that reading your book, you also talk about fleeing violence from Mexico. And what was the moment from your childhood or your teen years where you first understood you didn't have the same safety net as everyone else, of maybe different status, class status, or maybe just people in general that didn't live in your neighborhood, in your state, in your city? When was that moment where you said, "Oh, like I really need to get out of here, or else I might die"?
Yeah. So growing up in Culiacan, Sinaloa, it's literally one of the most dangerous places. Probably the most dangerous. And I think if you Google, for people who are not familiar with it, I'm going to say, and I hate to give this reference, but El Chapo is from Culiacan, Sinaloa, the state that I'm from. So since I was little, I always saw a lot of violence around me. By the age of 14, 15, I don't recall the exact age, I already been in the middle of like 3 shootings. I seen bodies on the floor. I seen crazy things since I was little. And it got to a point where even though that my parents did the greatest job at protecting their kids and like take them to church and showing them God's love and like the way to live the right way, violence was always around us. And by the age of 16, 17, unconsciously, I thought that that's how it was everywhere, right? Like pretty much living in a war zone. I didn't have that understanding, and I had a visa since I was a kid. I will always come to United States, and unlike other people believe that all the immigrants' stories are exactly the same, they are not. They are very complex, and my story is that I come from a very privileged and family, and I grew up with the best parents, with the best life. My parents had a lot of money, so. Even though the violence was around me, I was always extra protected, which made me a little bit blindsided about a lot of things. But it was when my dad passed away that we found out that my dad was a businessman who made decisions that were mistakes. He unfortunately owed money to people who were working for the cartel. He had no idea my dad was a great man and all died on that hill. I'm fully aware that he made mistakes that he didn't know. So he was receiving death threats for a very long time that we were not aware. We had security at the house, but we had no idea exactly what I mean. If you live in a war zone place, you don't ask questions because you think, I mean, my parents have successful businesses. Well, that's a normality, which how crazy is to think that you don't even ask questions because you assume, well, it's a mess around, so I guess this is what it is. But my dad pretty much died because of stress. He had 5 tumors in his head. And after he passed away, after you lose your dad and your superhero and the person who protects you, what else is there for you to figure it out? And that's when my mom had to tell us and confess to us that we've been receiving death threats for months. And that was the reason why my parents were trying for us to move somewhere else inside Mexico. But things got so bad, and my parents were losing a lot of money during that time because it was during 2009 when everything was a mess economically. My parents, because they were business people, they were also losing a lot of their money, so they were not able to pay off the debt that they had. So the only choice that we had, and nobody asked me if that's what I wanted to do. Nobody. To the point that I left, I packed for 3 days. That tells you everything that you need to know about my story.
Yeah.
How for me it was just, we're just gonna go to the United States for 3 days, 7 days. I left my laptop, I left everything that I owned, thinking that I was gonna come back. And look at me, many years later, life became something that I would never. To me, it has been like honestly a nightmare, like a horror movie. And that's the story for a lot of people. Nobody had that choice. Nobody leaves home for the sake of it. Nobody leaves home thinking that you're never going to see your house again, that you're never going to see your loved ones again, you know? And that's another thing that we have to take account on, because carrying that on your shoulders, and you know that feeling very well, carrying that is one of the main root causes of why our health is the way that it is.
Yeah, and even after we know that there's violence that it's being inflicted, and that you could potentially be harmed physically and mentally, that violence, we often don't want to leave what we call home, right? Because, like, for instance, now, like, I've been here for 27 years, right? And everything that's been happening in the last couple of weeks have really sat my husband and my mom and I and my family, we just sat down and we've talked about our options, right? And when the option comes of us going either back to Mexico or just going somewhere else, there's this fear of not being able to identify yourself with anything else other than what you've been for the past year. Let's just say the last year, not even the last 27 years, right? Because we built the home here. So I can't even imagine, like, you coming here in your teens at a moment where you're deciphering what you want to do for the rest of your life, where you're deciphering, if you want to have a boyfriend or if you want to just have friends and go party or whatever you want to call it. But then your life is kind of flipped upside down and you're pretty much forced into becoming an adult, right? And pretty much, which leads me to my next question. How does growing up undocumented change the way you see things like school, friendships, or even dreaming about the future? And I know that you grew up part of your life in Mexico, but what people sometimes don't understand is particularly Americans, let's just call them Americans for lack of a better word. They don't understand that when you come here, no matter what age you come, even if you come as an adult, you have to grow up all over again because you come to a foreign land. You come to a foreign place where you need to start not only getting people to know you, but also getting to know the system. So, again, how did growing up undocumented here change the way you see things, such as school, friendships, or even dreaming about a future that I'm sure you're still holding on to?
Yeah. Thank you so much for saying that. I feel validated by that question. So for me, the main thing was that I haven't felt safe in like 20 years. I haven't felt safe. The carrying that, and I'm sure, and this makes me really sad to think that a lot of people feel that way, documented or not documented. And I want to say it because I don't ever want to overlook the pain that other people have and the fear that other people have. But being an immigrant came with a lot of challenges, and I feel like I would say the first one would be safety. For me, there is no choice. If I leave, I'm not safe there. If I stay, I'm not safe. So that's a little bit complicated to digest that type of information. But for me, it was everything from relationships, from the fact that I have been in a school. I have had to drop out of school 3 times when I was one of the best ones in my class. Made me realize that it didn't matter how much effort and how many sacrifices I made to excel and become a wonderful lawyer, because aside of all the things I love to do on my creative side, I have always wanted to become a lawyer. Funny enough, to defend people like me, I became the people that I wanted to defend, which to me, only God understands why that happened. But the fact that I always had the desire for justice, and I never thought I would end up on the end of the ones who need justice the most. And seeing myself like trying to get to school, I was paying out of pocket because people always came to me and told me undocumented people get everything free, they get education free. Well, that's not true, and I can prove that I was one of the best in my classes every single time, and I have to drop out. So for me, it was, if there is a way for me to help people, even though that I haven't become a lawyer, I will find that path. I will follow that path that leads me to my calling and my purpose, which is helping people in whatever way I can. But to live my dreams of becoming a lawyer has been one of the worst grieving things that I have ever had to grieve the life that I thought that I was going to have, and is unfortunately not accessible for me. And I would say I found that peace I haven't, to be honest. It's still so painful. I'm still striving to get there, even though that it's so hard to be able to see what's going to happen just even tomorrow,
Yeah. I mean, we live in such volatile times, and that one thing that you mentioned that I want to piggyback on, because, we don't talk about it often, or when we do, even when we talk to our close friends, our close people who don't have the same experience as us, they kind of look at us like it's strange, like we're trying to play victim. And here's the thing, as undocumented people, let's just say as immigrants in general, we go through grief for many reasons. We have to grieve leaving the life behind that we once imagined we were going to live forever, and then we also have to grieve the fact that we get here to chase the American dream. But that American dream, we never get to chase it because we have to pivot into surviving, and then we have to grieve that as well. And then when we get a moment to finally celebrate or actually achieve a little quarter of the dream that we're aspiring for, we don't have the energy left to do it because we're so concerned about everything that's happening around that at any moment I could be celebrating, let's say, like you said earlier, like bestseller, right? Or you're publishing your book, but then tomorrow we don't know if we're going to be here to continue celebrating that, right? And it's also very hard to accept compliments or celebrations because we're also grieving the fact that we don't want to be placed in this position, yet we have to, and we're brave enough to do it because that's all we have left to do, right? To become a beacon of hope for everyone else. So I just wanted to piggyback on that because I identify a lot with that with you. I also came here with a visa, and for the longest, I was kind of always told that I had a privilege coming here, so my story would never identify as anybody else that crossed the border differently. But also, like having that privilege kind of made me less than for some reason. Around the community, so I also completely understand that, and having to grieve not being accepted sometimes by your own community, and when all you want is to just be seen for what you are, an artist that's creating art, to be able to have a voice, right? Which leads me to my next question. Everything that we're talking about, if I sound repetitive, it's just I was like I wrote all these specific questions. Has there ever been a moment where you felt invisible? Or another where maybe you felt too visible?
Oof. Oh, that's a great question because people have asked me, well, I would think that your book would be more successful by now, which I take it as a compliment. I don't think people mean it in a bad way. And I agree in the sense of like, I'll say it until the day of my days. Antero has really helped it because this book should have the potential to get farther than it has, but because I'm incredible limited, I'm not able to go to places, I'm not able to speak in certain podcasts and things. The book hasn't reached their its potential or any of other things that I'm doing because of how I need to be visible because the work that I'm doing is very necessary, but I don't want to be visible, which is like very conflicted. The work needs to go out, but how can I be part of it? And the powerful part of the work that I do is that somebody like me who is going through a lot of depression and anxiety for the things that are happening has to speak up for people like me, right? How can I find a balance while putting out but not putting myself out? It doesn't make any sense. It's a contradiction, and people have told me and tried to offend me and cuss me out and saying like, well, I hope that you die, and like the amount of, and I don't have a lot of followers, so I think people think that nobody's looking at what me and Andrea are doing just because I don't have a lot of followers. But the amount of hate that I had to deal with on a daily basis is something that people might not understand, and at the end of the day, the rage that you and I carry, you and I understand, is that it comes from love, and it comes from the fact that we know that this is our calling to represent our people, right? And if we ever get tired of doing this, then who is going to speak up for us? And so it's complicated, and it's a contradiction because I want my work to be out there, but I don't want to be out there.
No, and it makes sense. I mean, and I want to talk about something, a conversation that you and I had in the past via text a couple months ago, where I actually reached out to you, and I sincerely offer you an apology because I never thought about it that way. But I remember one day I was like, I'm so frustrated. I was like, why is your book not popping off, right? I was like, why am I not seen in so many places? I was like, you should be traveling. And then I remember you just kind of said like, yeah, you didn't really give me like a full reason, and I understand sometimes we get too exhausted to explain ourselves to people, but you putting it like this, I completely understand. And again, that's just so for everybody to understand that although that Alix and I have such a similarity when we came to the United States, our life as immigrants has been completely different because I had the privilege of having DACA, right? And I have the privilege of not being married and fixing my status through my marriage. A lot of people don't have that. So one thing that we also have to learn, and I think this is just me in general speaking to the public that's listening to this, if you have some sort of privilege that you're sharing with someone that does not have that same privilege, be sensitive to that, because you don't know what that person is going through. You don't know if what you're saying, it might come from a place of good, but to them it might just be a place of hate or a place of disillusion, right? And I now that you said it out loud, it just made me think about that moment, and I feel I offer you a sincere apology because I understand what you're going through and how despite us like publishing things and putting films out and doing all these things, I personally think that at the end of the day, if it reaches one person, that's amazing. But ultimately, we do have that goal and that dream of becoming what the white person becomes, right? Because we have the same potential, we have the same power to create and become these things. Unfortunately, we have to hold back sometimes. And I'm seeing it now with me too. I've canceled a couple tour dates, and I haven't said anything because I'm embarrassed. But the thing is, like, aside from being embarrassed, me personally at home canceling these tours, I also fear for my safety going to these places. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to get there, if I might be arrested, or if I'm going to be detained, or if I'm putting my community at risk by coming to these events. So I had to cancel 4 stops between San Diego and my next stop in Portland for that same reason. So I completely understand and I sympathize with you, and I apologize if I've ever made you feel, any way that, because I know that you and I, we know each other for a while. We had talks. I can be harsh sometimes, but I've always come from a place of love. But now I fully understand where you're standing, and I'm always going to be here because I love you so much. So
And I love you too, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you to be so eloquent about this, because that's something that I've been trying to talk to the community and to make people understand. Even though that we are all immigrants, all of this community, we're all immigrants, we have different experiences and we see life in a different lens. And I went to school with people who were DACA recipients that would, a lot of times, I don't want to judge them because they might see this, I don't know from what place he came, but people would tell me, I thought that you would graduate, like you were one of the best in the class, and like and sometimes for me I'm just like, after a few years of me over explaining, because unfortunately I deal with people pleasing and other things that I'm working on, to always over explain myself. Yeah, but it wasn't my decision, but I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm paying taxes, I'm doing this, I'm doing work community, I have done everything in my power to be a great asset for this country, thinking that someday maybe my sacrifices would pay off, or even to be seen as human. That would be enough for me, right? But
Yeah.
there were a lot of times where I had conversations with DACA recipients that I'm like, but you don't know, like
Yeah.
you have the privilege to work legally, you have the privilege to travel if you get a parole. A lot of things that undocumented people like me can only dream about. And trust me, and God knows my heart when I say I don't desire people to be in my position. I want people to have everything that they deserve and dignity. And I will never be jealous or upset that other immigrants get to do that. I'm just asking that people understand that concept, what it is to be in a position where there is absolutely nothing accessible for you. Now, I also want to mention that things are moving really fast. So even DACA recipients are in a lot of danger, and I want to clarify that. I'm not saying they're not in danger. They are too. But there is still some things that are absolutely not accessible for people like me. And people need to understand that, because they keep thinking that not having documents makes you not only a number and to fully dehumanize you, it also makes you your own community to question things that might not even be able to understand, when it's like you guys should take the time and accountability about finding the right information about your own people, because at the end of the day, this is all we have. We have each other, and that should be enough. But I think now people are waking up to the fact that if we don't unite and we don't protect each other, nobody will.
Yeah, and you know what? I will speak on that too, because as a DACA recipient, because I still have my DACA permit as I'm adjusting my status, there's a lot of privilege that we have that people don't understand. You know, we get to do certain things that someone in your shoes will never be able to do, because of whatever reason right now there's no legislation, there's no amnesty out there, and we do have to be sensitive about that. You know, I think the problem with and I mean this very respectfully as a DACA recipient too, the problem is that we come to this country very young, that we don't understand what the policies are when we become adults. All we know and we care about is us being able to move forward in life somehow, and we're grateful for that we forget that we have our brothers, our sisters, our parents, our friends who don't qualify for that. I mean, I remember when DAPA was introduced, which is a deferred action for parents of childhood arrivals, and then it got striked by Congress. You know, I was really disappointed, because I thought that my parents would probably have an opportunity to also have some kind of status. But at the same time, like, you know, other people get left behind, you know, people that don't qualify for any kind of program. And I completely understand where you're coming from. And I agree that because we have a privilege, we should be more sensitive to the situation, to other immigrant situations, because we're not a monolith. That's the other thing too. Like here in Hollywood, we have to fight we have to go around the fact that Latinos are not from this, not only Mexican, and because they're not only Mexican, they're from a different places of the world, which often becomes so conflicted. You know, same thing with immigrants. Immigrants come from different places of the world, and they all have different statuses. And you know, we just because something applies to me, I shouldn't go around assuming that it also applies to you. And if it doesn't apply to you, question why you can't apply for certain things. But instead, just listen to you, because that's what we need to do more. We need to listen more than to judge and to give opinions. My following question is something that you touch a lot in your book, and is that this country benefits from undocumented labor every single day. Where do you see the biggest hypocrisy right now at this moment in life?
Shoot, that's God. Well, to start with, isn't it funny that during the pandemic, well, not funny, but isn't it interesting that during the pandemic that everybody was able to have fresh food on their table? Because of what? Because undocumented people never stopped working. People still were able to work from home, because they still had their nannies coming in and risking their lives to get, you know, let's just start there. How is it possible that 6 years ago, everybody was like praising undocumented labor because they knew that this society and this economy keep on going because of our sweat and tears and blood. And people will never admit that. Let's just start it. That's one of the little things that I've been thinking a lot. 6 years ago, you guys were talking about essential work because you knew that it was farm workers who were abused and enslaved during a pandemic. When there were fires, they never stopped, and people will praise them. But when it comes to law and enforcement, now you care. Like how? Like it doesn't make any sense to me because I feel like the propaganda that we've been seeing has been very effective because people had lost their compassion completely, everyone, right? And in the past, I've been saying this a lot, but when we were younger, we would read about Anne Frank and the Nazis and all these things, and we would think, I would think, this could never happen to this society because people are so self-aware and their conscience has grew, and like people would never see that we have all the information in the world accessible for us a click away. This could never happen. And the people who did these atrocities and allowed these atrocities to happen were people who were monsters. In my head, I would think that. But in reality, it wasn't monsters. It was the neighbor. It was the teacher. It was the people who didn't only stay quiet, but they were complicit. It was the churches that pushed these agendas to people to actually make them believe that we were the bad ones to distract them for what the real problems are. So I think the whole thing is so mind-blowing to me to have conversations with people that I have loved for many years and to come to realize that these people are brainwashed and that we have to accept that and take it for what it is, because trying to have a real conversation would unfortunately do anything.
It won't, because people are more interested now in listening to debate you, listening to argue with you. And I miss the days when people would listen to find a solution or listen to understand, right? Now we're so quick, and I include myself because sometimes I've done it. I've done it too, and I try to practice when I'm preaching, where we listen just to understand, which is enough, I'm not so much about like, if you don't share something on social media, then you're a hypocrite. No. You know what? I understand people have different lives. People have different things they need to care about and they need to worry about and they need to protect themselves, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're going to jump into the subject of what's happening right now in the world in terms of immigration, then you should at least, even if you know nothing, you should at least be open to listening, to understand, and not say, well, this is what I think is happening. Because what you think is happening, 99% of the time is not factual. It's not factual, right? So when we see these headlines about the raids and the increased enforcement, what hits you first? Fear, anger, numbness? What do you feel about what's happening? I'll tell you, I know what I feel, but I want to hear what you feel about these, about all these headlines, which sometimes are very melodramatic. Not because of what they're publishing is not important. It's very important, but I feel like they're also very propaganda driven. So how do you feel when you see them?
Honestly, heartbroken, but more than anything, afraid. And to say otherwise would be a lie. I feel like I have been incredibly brave my entire life, and I'm very afraid. And I think it requires courage to say that I'm terrified of my life, because this is something that I want to make very clear, right? Undocumented people are not scared. I feel like, and I'll say it with all my heart, and I hope people understand this. Getting deported would be a smaller problem than what is actually happening. And I'm not going to go so much into it because I don't want us to get in trouble. But where are the people who are disappeared? What is happening? What is the violence that is happening in these centers? That is what the fear comes from. And I hope that people understand that there are things that people are not talking about, that the media is trying to push down, that they are hiding it from audiences. There are bigger things happening. And when people are saying that we are going back to the 1940s, they are not exaggerating, and I hope that people do their own research. It's not for you and I to educate people on what is happening, because there's very little information about that, but it's there.
Yeah.
And also, just to think about the fact, if we were seeing ICE agents who were trained to do law enforcement and all of that, is that what is happening right now? Are they actually going for the criminals who were on the bad list? Is that what is happening? Or is it kidnappers and people who we don't even know if they are actually ICE agents? So the fact that people are supporting this is like, do you quite understand that you're also in danger? Are you aware of that?
Well, I don't think people really understand the magnitude of what ICE has become. And let me just say this for those of you that don't know, and they like to throw out statistics or facts about the past. Yes, we're aware that the Clinton administration, well, first of all, ICE didn't exist back then. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it did exist back then. It's been more in the last 20 years. But yes, let's just start with the Obama administration. Yes, Obama administration used ICE and there was deportations. Yes, 100%. Same thing with the Biden administration. Same thing when Trump started his administration. What people don't understand is that we're not so much, well, first of all, yes, abolish ICE, because from the very beginning that it came out, it's been an abomination. But what people are fighting now is the inhumane way of how they're doing things. The way that they're deporting people, snatching them away from their homes, their cars, their workplace, their place of prayer, and taking them to God knows where, because there's no clear statistics or clear report of where these people are being held, or when or where they're being deported to, right? And you know, when you bring up these issues, it's always, well, we don't care because they don't belong here. But it's like, well, you didn't belong here either, but you're here, right? And it's so unfortunate because we're not saying that we didn't fight the previous administrations when it came to ICE. We did, but now we're no longer just fighting the fact that ICE exists. We're fighting the fact of how they are moving themselves, how they're moving. Yeah. And the thing that really, really, really hurts me the most, and may she rest in peace, is that it took for a white citizen to be shot for people to understand that this has been happening for the last 20 years to undocumented immigrants, you know, people that haven't been accounted for. So for me, that's what, you know, the question that I was asking you, what does it cause? That's what it causes to me. It causes rage to see these headlines when we all knew this was going to happen. I mean, you know this, but I wrote Guajolote, my next film. Yeah. I wrote it in 2018 when I predicted this was going to happen, and people thought I was
sent it to me as soon as you wrote it, and it's like...
And I think it's important. We talked about it, and you were like, I don't think this could happen, or who knows? And I was like, well, I think it can certainly happen if this president gets elected. This was the first time that he was running, and people looked at me like I was crazy, and now, literally, what's happening right now, it's in that script. It's like a time machine, but... I sometimes, just how you feel, like, you know, you were saying you don't wish for anybody to go through what you're going through. I wish I didn't have to write these things. But unfortunately, sometimes, Alix, we have to live through these moments, and we have to write these things to make people understand. Because we're so tired of going around and saying, well, like, for instance, having to explain ourselves and answer questions like we're statistics ourselves. You know, it's like, I'm just a human that's trying to live and trying to understand why this is happening. And on top of that, I have to educate you like Google doesn't exist, like books don't exist. No, it's ridiculous, and it's tiring.
You know what?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. One of the things that I wanted to say, I feel like people are so angry at people like you and I who are so spoken about these issues for a very long time, because this didn't just started. You and I have been talking about these issues for like 15 years, right? Yeah. So this is not because of what's happening. And it really bothers me that people, the first thing that they're telling me is that just accept that this administration won over yours. And I'm like, when did I claim I was anything? When did I claim that I support the Democrats? And I'll say it, and I'll say it until the day I die. When have I claimed that I agree with the things that they have done? And people have told you are upset, and Trump didn't founded ICE or invented ICE. We're fully aware of that. Yeah. We're fully aware of that. And people always come to me trying to, and also in person,
abdue you. Like, they want to abdue what you're saying. And it's like, nah, we understand what you're saying.
In my events, people have been very violent and like come to me and try to educate me about the things that Obama and Biden did, as if I'm like unaware that what they have done, right? But we are not talking about that. We are fully aware of the atrocities and certain war criminals in the past, not just this
Yeah.
administration. We are fully aware of that. Stop saying that. But was there a due process for people during that time where people mass kidnapping people in the street during that time? What we are fighting is something so much bigger than what Democrats and Republicans are doing, right? We're fighting a much bigger monster that people are now wanting to see just for the fact that they are blindsided by just it's this one versus this one. That's not what it is. It's human rights versus something else that
Right.
I'm, you know?
And that leads me to my next question. But before we go on to that, I just want to say something. Back in the Obama administration, when detention centers were established, because that's when they were established, we had the issue where they were called icebox because they kept people in these detention centers that we've seen in pictures, and they didn't have access to heat. It was always kept cold. So, activists went out and they protested, and to the point where they were finally introducing heaters to the people that were detained, right? People that were waiting to be called for their asylum petition, people that were most likely detained to be deported, and they were accounted for. We were not protesting putting human lives next to alligators. We weren't protesting about countless of bodies that have gone missing. We weren't protesting about kids that were being separated from parents in California that ended up in Wyoming and Texas and in Oregon. For lack of understanding, we were protesting the lack of heat, which is still not okay, but was granted. Now the things that are happening, it's an abomination, and that's I think that what hurts me the most, because despite having a status or not, where's the human dignity about another human being, about a life, right? It's almost like it's no longer your life matters. It's more about we really just don't care, right? And
No, people are celebrating that.
yeah, that too. And it leads me to my next question, which I think it's one of the most controversial, and one that really, really, really upsets me, because we have the Latinos who have citizenship and talk about, I did it the right way. It's like, sweetie, there's no right way, but congratulations for you thinking that, but there's no right way, right? So there's this narrative about good immigrants versus bad immigrants. What's dangerous about that framing?
Yeah. Wow. Well, let me just start, like I mentioned earlier. I have done everything in the book to earn a second chance. I have done, and not because I was trying to earn a second chance, but that's just because who I am as a human, right? I have done everything correctly. I have added a lot of value to this country. And even then, there was no way for me to earn dignity. And another thing that I really want to focus on right now is this. People were talking, I understand that everything right now is a mess. Everybody's in danger, especially not people from Latin America. They were in danger. But I also want to mention something that people still don't quite understand about why a lot of Mexicans, because people come to me with that question all the time. But why is it that you didn't get TPS or any type of refuge? And let me just say it. Mexico has never been categorized in a war zone, even though that it is, right? Even the media is bad at portraying what is actually happening there. So when I came, there was absolutely not protection. And I tried to get asylum, I tried to get refuge. None of that worked, for the simple fact, and I can say it like this, because for being from Mexico, there was nothing for you to be protected for. Yeah. Now I understand the Venezuelans are losing their protection. TPS is also, all of those things are fine. But just for people to understand, in the past, the type of process and systematic issues that we have, that this is why we are where we are now, because the issues that were happening there were not considered real issues.
Right. Well, let me just tell you something, though, and I mean this very respectfully to whoever's out there listening that still believes that we come to this country and do it the right way. My mom had the opportunity to seek her petition for adjustment of status through being in a volatile, violent marriage, because it transcribed from Mexico all the way to out here, right? But sometimes we don't know that, because this information is not accessible to people that come here for a better life. And sometimes a better life means just not being slapped across the face one more time, being able to have a simple meal for more than just one day, being able to walk in the street without having to look at your back and making that someone might hurt you or do something to you, right? For us as undocumented folks, just being able to breathe without having to worry about any kind of violence, any kind of segregation, any kind of dismissal is just okay. And we're not seeking to gain anything out of it, because we're also aware that we're not in a place that belongs to us, right? With time, as time goes by, we become part of it, but there's always that voice reminding us that we don't belong, right? So I want to ask you this: if you can make every American sit with one uncomfortable truth about immigration for 60 seconds, what would it be?
Well, to start with, that they don't know nothing about us, right? And they have fully believed the lies that the media has been feeding them before this administration. Stop with the madness. We're not against this administration because he won and because we're resentful of it. Right. We are in because our lives are at risk. And unfortunately, whoever is reading this, whoever is reading, listening, whatever, whoever is getting this information has to know they are also in danger. And that if they come and if they allow these atrocities to happen to people like us, it's going to happen to them too at some point. They're just starting, and to wake up to the fact that they're also not safe. And also, and my question for the people who have these like better versus bad, I'm just going to ask, are these kidnaps bettering your life in any way? Are you able to afford groceries better? Are you able to afford a house now that these kidnappings are happening? In what way is making your life better?
Right.
That's my question to people. And with my heart, I tell you, I want people to have dignity. I want people to be able to afford life. I want children to be safe. But at the end of the day, are these kidnappings doing that to you? Are they making a better life accessible for you? And in what way is bettering your life?
And that's a valid question that I'm going to go ahead and put in the comment section so people can answer that question, because there's this whole discussion about good versus bad. And it's like, I kind of when I asked you that question, I wanted to hear what you thought, because even if you do it the right way, it's still bad for a lot of people, because ultimately it's not an immigration issue. It's a race issue, which unfortunately, and I say this very respectfully, we live in a country that has built its foundation on racism, on race being the first, the most important thing when it came to making decisions, right? Mm-hmm. So I wrote a chapter in my book that I dedicate to America, to the America I met 27 years ago, to the America that I hope that could be great eventually one day. And I say that sincerely, because now we're at a point where I would really like America to be great again. Not this administration's slogan, but me taking power of that slogan and saying, I wish that America could be great again. Because when I came here, it's because this was the best country in the world to be able to just survive. And now it feels like a burden to even try to survive. So thank you for that. I'm going to go ahead and leave that question in the comments so people can answer. And, to wrap it up, I want to ask you a more personal question. What does telling your story give you now that silence never could?
Yeah, I feel that something that really breaks my heart is that at this point, just imagining a better world seems so far away. And I say it because I'm going through that too. I hope that the work I'm doing and the work that you and I do, because you're also doing this work, brings that sense of hope for people again. The sense of hope that someday that we can imagine a world where immigrants can have dignity, when children can be safe. And it's starting just with the simple thought, because I feel like we have forgotten that hope get us through, that unity get us through. That would be enough for me, and that would give me peace in my heart, and it would make all the things that we have done worth it. But if people don't find that hope, it wouldn't. At the end of the day, we have to strive to reach that, to go back to the fact that things can change, but it's going to require a lot from all of us.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also talk about how what's being done now is going to take years of reparation. It's not going to be it's not going to be one or two administrations. And if there's an opportunity to try to undo what this evil administration has done. And I actually do have one last question. What do undocumented listeners need to hear right now? What would you like to tell them?
Oof. I just want to tell them to keep going. And we haven't come this far to just give everything up. And that includes our safety, which I want to tell undocumented people, do whatever it takes to keep your family, to keep your children safe. Yeah. And I mean it in all the words. People can take it whatever they want. I'm saying this. Do whatever it takes to keep yourself safe. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I want to believe with you in better days, but for now, just make a plan. Unfortunately, we have to have these horrible and horrendous conversations with our loved ones.
Yeah.
Get air tags. Put it everywhere. Get cameras in your car.
For real.
Cameras in your apartments, in your houses, and do whatever it takes to keep yourself safe. And I mean it in the most. God knows my heart.
Yeah.
And I mean it sincerely. And I want to tell you that we're gonna make it through this. But the only way that we're gonna make it through this is by realizing that we depend on each other at this time more than ever. So rely on your community, build that community, whatever that you need. Also become that for your brothers and sisters who are going through the same thing. Even if you is giving people extra love, going that extra mile, do that. Because that is what is going to get us through.
Yeah, you're right. 100%. I resonate with that. And before we leave, Alix, where can we find you online? Where can we find your book? Tell us everything. Do you have any online events coming up? And please invite the audience to purchase your book. Tell us where we can get it.
Yeah, you can find my book in all the platforms, and also you can listen to my book on audiobook. Unfortunately, on Spotify, if we know, you know what it is. It's on Amazon. This is so complicated, right? To tell you, my book is everywhere: Barnes and Noble, Penguin Random House, all the places you can find it, and also you can listen to it. My name is Alix Dick. And you can find my book everywhere. And like the best way to contact me is on my Instagram. So,
which we'll put down here. We'll put the Instagram down here so you guys can follow her.
I was just gonna say that.
Yeah, follow her, please. She's an amazing filmmaker, an amazing author, but even more amazing human being. And I'm so happy that she is the first guest on my podcast, Zero Fucks Left.
I'm honored, by the way.
Yeah, I'm very excited to continue this. As you can see, these are unfiltered conversations that I'm going to be having every week. But before we go, I want to go ahead and give love to our sponsor, VX Credit Repair. Because listen, without credit, you're practically a ghost. If you're trying to fix your financial life and get seen by the system instead of erased by it, check it out. That seems such a contradiction with my podcast, and I love our sponsor, but it's the truth. If you have no credit, you're a ghost, and that's the other. Listen, I'm gonna have them as a guest to talk more about that. But listen, it almost feels like in this country, you have to be fighting a lot of time to be seen, and it's exhausting. But yeah, get your credit fixed if it's not fixed. Stay tuned. Again, thank you so much for tuning in for the very first episode of Zero Fucks Left. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did, because I love what we talked about today. We'll be back every week with a new unfiltered episode exploring the moments, the systems, and the experiences that shape us and sometimes force us to evolve, all without holding anything back. Stay tuned, stay honest, and keep having zero fucks left. Goodbye.
I love you guys.
Love you.
Bye.